Hey guys. Oh, microphone, gotta put that on. I've tried to film this video this is my third go at it this morning. I am so sleepy and I just want to be enough for you. In spite of my energy levels, I am really excited to film this video because it is my September reading wrap up. This is the most books I've ever read in a month up to date. Being back in this momentum of reading a lot has just been amazing for my mental health. Have books that I'm excited to pick up, that I'm invested in. It's been a really fun month. I think fall reading is always so much better than summer reading. I always have all of these goals for summer reading and then I don't do any of them because there's so much that happens in the summer. There's so many social things. This summer, I was producing and acting in a film that I wrote with my fiance. The word fiance just sounds so pretentious to me, but he is my fiance, Jean-Luc, and he also directed it. And that was a really big undertaking, so that was a large reason why I think I didn't read as much. But I do think it's not a coincidence that this month that I've read the most books came after these 2 months where I wasn't reading as much. I think I read maybe 5 books a month, which is still not bad obviously, but for me that's not a lot. This month in September I read 15 books. To read 15 books every month or even 10 books every month, it's not that sustainable. I think that reading kind of has to ebb and flow a little bit for me because otherwise it's just not going to be enjoyable. I think there is a place to kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit and watch some TV or do something different, hang out with your friends. Yeah, and then it's just then you're really excited to start reading again when we all go inside and act like hermits for the fall and the winter. I feel like I'm yapping, so let's get into these books. These 15 books, genuinely, I don't think there was one on here that I did not enjoy. I think that they range from 3 to 5 stars. And there's only one 3-star. A lot of these are books that I highly recommend. There's a pretty wide variety of genre here. A tip to reading a lot and getting back into reading is having that variety of genre, just because it keeps it spicy, keeps it interesting. If I'm reading the same thing over and over again, I'm gonna get bored. The first book I want to talk about is called Good Energy by Casey Means. I'm gonna go in the order that I read them. So this was the first book I read in September. This talks a lot about how different factors such as diet, sunlight, environment, exercise, sleep all contribute to things like depression, anxiety, insomnia, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, and kind of how you can improve your metabolic health and give the cells in your body the things that they need to support you and make you happy and healthy, basically. I would say if you are triggered by disordered eating, I would avoid this book. A big portion of this book talks about diet. I've been more cognizant of the ingredient list of things as I'm buying them and making them. I think it can be seen as a little extreme, the diet portion of this, and as much as I would love to follow it, it's I also want to enjoy my foods. I don't know. For me, it's all about moderation and making healthy choices as much as I can, but also enjoying eating. I have done things I've replaced pasta with lentil pasta and chickpea pasta. I've been eating more nutritional yeast. I'm a vegan, so I'm finding ways to get more protein and limit wheat for my diet a little bit more, but I'm by no means gluten-free. So yeah, it's just been a little bit more of a moderate kind of change and awareness to what I'm eating. It doesn't just talk about diet though. It talks about getting outside, it talks about sleep patterns, it talks about social patterns, it talks about, working, blue light, all of these things. And I do think it's a really good book to read and not necessarily follow every single thing in it, but just kind of have more of an awareness of taking care of your body, being kind to your body, and giving it the things that it needs to support you. We are kind of in this age of wellness, but we actually don't know how to actually take care of our bodies in ways that are helpful. If you can, definitely give this book a read. It's very enlightening. There's a lot of statistics, a lot of data in it. Next, I read this book, Die Hot with a Vengeance, Essays on Vanity by Sable Young. I love this cover, first of all. This is a collection of essays about kind of beauty, I would say. It doesn't offer anything that's absolutely groundbreaking in terms of beauty and self-care and body positivity and empowerment and self-perception, but I think it offers a unique perspective that I haven't read before because the author, Sable Young, used to work at Allure. She was like a beauty editor for Allure. She does not work there anymore. And so she definitely has a unique perspective on the beauty industry and is therefore able to question what is in all of these trends for people that are making money off of them, and like what's actually good for you, and like what it could be harmful to you and your self-perception and your mental health and all of these things. Oh, I didn't share what I rated the other book. Okay, wait. So I gave Good Energy 5 stars because I just thought it was so informative. This one I gave 4 stars, again, because it wasn't anything like I didn't read anything that I hadn't read before or like thought about before, but the perspective was appreciated, so I gave it a 4 out of 5. If you are looking to get into more nonfiction reads or like essays, I think this is a really good place to start because it's pretty fast moving. It's not like too heavy or like too dense or like too hard to understand. It's all kind of just laid out in a very easy way to digest. So yeah, if you're looking to like read books on like feminism or just any sort of nonfiction in general, get more into essays, I think this is a really nice place to start. Next I read, this was so fun, I read The Guest by Emma Cline. I've had this for a few months and I was saving it for Labor Day weekend because it takes place during Labor Day weekend. It is a character-driven book about this girl, Alex. She's kind of like escaped her life in New York City because she's done some, I would say, like questionable things and has some like unresolved issues in a lot of her relationships with people in New York City, I guess you could say. And she's been staying and like having a relationship with this older man in the Hamptons, but he dismisses her. She's basically homeless for all intents and purposes and decides to figure out how to stay in the Hamptons for the week leading up to Labor Day weekend. It's pretty like humorous and interesting. It's less than 300 pages. You know, the main character is not a good person, but you root for her. And I love books that kind of like make the reader's like moral compass invert a little bit, I guess. That's always super interesting to me. This was en route to be a 5-star read, but the ending was kind of disappointing. It kind of just left you like, what? So, which is often kind of the case with a lot of like character-driven stuff. Like you don't really get like a nice little like, let's wrap this in a bow and like give you all the answers that you want. But this kind of, for me, took it a step a little bit too far. Reading it at the end of summer was amazing. I also do love the cover. Next, I finally did it. I read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This I gave a 4.75. I really love this book. It reminded me of how I felt when I first started reading Sarah J. Maas from like a pacing standpoint. It really just threw you right into this fantasy world and didn't stop until the end. Like you really just were on a ride. It's also very different than Sarah J. Maas. Like it's, I would say, like Sarah J. Maas in like a pink fluffy cloud. I feel like I've been saying this in every book, but if you want to get into fantasy, I also think this is a great book to start with because the world building is pretty seamless and like easy to follow. Things get introduced, but like at a pace and way that is like really easy to follow. If you have not read this, a lot of people have, maybe you probably have if you're watching this video, but like please read it. It's amazing. And it is a trilogy. I read Stephanie Garber, the author of this trilogy, has another trilogy called Caraval. I read the first book in that, and the both trilogies take place in the same universe, but they are also standalone. Technically, I believe if you wanted to read both, you should read Caraval first. A lot of people don't. I wasn't as crazy about Caraval. I think I gave it like a 3-star, but I did recognize characters from it and had a little bit more of a sense of the world going into it. I read the rest of the trilogy this month, which I'll get into in a moment. This was amazing and a great like start of fall book, I would say. Flipped through these pages, like it was such a quick read. Okay, next I read The Match by Sarah Adams, which I didn't realize. I thought this was a new book, but it was written in 2020. It's part of a duology. The second book is called The Enemy, which I might check out later. I gave this 4 stars. I love Sarah Adams books. I read the When in Rome, Practice Makes Perfect duology. I loved When in Rome. Practice Makes Perfect wasn't like my favorite. I loved this book. It takes place in Charleston, South Carolina. It's about this young woman with epilepsy who works for this nonprofit that pairs service dogs with other people that have epilepsy. This young girl with epilepsy wants a dog, kind of tricks her dad into, her single dad, into like going to this organization, and then, you know, they hit it off I would say. It's just very snug. It's very snug. I love dogs. This was like a really fast, nice, like palate cleansing book. Next, I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This was recommended to me by my friend Taylor, who always gives me amazing book recs. Shout out to Taylor. This one I gave 4.75 stars. It was amazing. It didn't quite hit the 5-star mark for me, but it was so great. It is this mystery that takes place in the 80s in this camp. This girl, this 12, 13-year-old girl goes missing. Years earlier, her brother also went missing, and her family, I think, owns the camp or something. But it's really interesting. It takes place many points of view, and it also goes back and forth between different time periods. So it's like the main kind of plot line takes place in the 80s, and then it goes back to like the 50s and the 60s with the girl's parents and like other people. And the end is satisfying. I feel like sometimes you read these like mysteries and then like the end is like, come on. I don't want to say it's like an epic book, but it definitely just has a lot of characters. The world is really specific, and I just really I really appreciated the writing and like what went into creating all of these characters in this world and this tangled woven web. This has been on my list for so long. I finally read Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I don't rate memoirs technically, but this was amazing and I really highly recommend it. So this woman, Glennon, was married to a man and she had some kids, and like she wrote books about like being Christian or something. Her husband cheated on her a bunch, and then one day she fell in love with a woman, and then she just like completely changed her whole life and like her whole relationship to herself and the people around her, and kind of like set herself free. Really about her journey to trusting herself and her inner voice, honoring anger, honoring heartbreak, unleashing our truest, wildest instincts. I mean, it was a really good book, and I appreciated how brutally honest she was about herself and her life. Next, I read Finley Donovan is Killing It. This is one of those books that like I felt so dropped in from the first second I was reading it. Like it really like drops you in, but then as it went on, kind of started losing me a little bit. Like I was really invested in like the first half, and then like the second half I feel like wasn't as interesting as the first half, or I wasn't as invested in it. I gave it 3 stars. It's really funny. I think this would make a brilliant movie. I think it'd be so funny. It's about, she's basically this divorcee with these 2 children. She's like a struggling writer, like doesn't have that much money. She somehow becomes mistaken for like a hit woman and is presented with this offer to basically kill this man for money. And she becomes tangled up in a real life murder investigation. But it's like funny. I wouldn't say this is like a mystery thriller. It's more of like a comedy that is based in the realm of murder mystery. The ending is satisfying-ish, like plot-wise. I found myself like not caring by the end, if that makes sense. I wouldn't not recommend it, but there are definitely other books this month that I enjoyed a lot more than this one. Next, I read the second book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, The Ballad of Never After. This one was 4.5 stars for me. I guess I never explained what the first Once Upon a Broken Heart book was about, which perhaps I'll do now. I don't want to say what this one's about because it will give spoilers for the first one, but the first one is about this girl, Evangeline, who goes to visit this fate called the Prince of Hearts because the person she is in love with is going to marry somebody else. She wants that to change. This was very similar to the first book from the standpoint of pacing, all that stuff I was talking about earlier. I wasn't crazy about the ending, if I'm being honest. If you know, you know. I wasn't not crazy about it, but I wasn't crazy about it. You know? This one I read just as fast. It's about the same length. It's a little over 400 pages and just absolutely also flew by. Next, I read Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. I loved this book so much. This was like the perfect fall romance. I would say this is more than a palate cleansing romance. Like this was like a good story with great characters. It's a little longer. It's like a little over 400 pages. It's like a meteor rom-com. This I gave 5 stars. So this is the second book in the Rose Hill, I think it's going to be a trilogy by Elsie Silver. I had only read Wild Love, the first book in this trilogy by Elsie Silver, so I haven't read any of her other books. I want to after reading this book. The first book I wasn't crazy about. Like I really didn't feel connected to the characters. There was something missing for me personally and like my connection to it. This was totally different. You were just so dropped in from the second this book started. Like, I was so into it. The characters, like, you just feel like you know them, like you love them. It's about this famous country singer, Skylar, who, which is another trope I love, like famous celebrity seeks normal life in small town. Like, I love that. She escapes to Rose Hill to, you know, just escape all of these like toxic relationships and vibes that she experiences being a famous singer. Her family and other people around her and just fame in general. She wants to go record her new album, which is going to be all hers this time. It's going to be super raw and super honest with just her influence and like nobody else's. She's going to record it with Ford Grant, who's the main man in the first book. He has a recording studio. His dad's this like really famous like rock star, and he's a billionaire. She meets West, who is Rose, the woman from the first book. It's her brother, and they live next door. West has 2 children. I know a lot of people don't like children in books. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I've heard people say that don't like children in books, that these kids specifically, like, they did not mind. They were so cute. I loved them so much. It was just so snug. I loved it so much. It's a great autumn read. I mean, it's orange, so like, hello October. Yes, you can still get this for 20% off on Amazon. I'll leave the link down below. This is such a good book. I cannot recommend this enough for like a snug fall read where you just want to like fall in love with the characters and like feel really snug. I don't know. 5 more books. That's the thing. It's like you read all these books and you have to explain all of them at the end of the month. There's a lot of books. Next, I read Four Winds by Hannah Kristen. This is my first Hannah Kristen book. I, since reading this, purchased, well, my mom got me The Nightingale, and then I got The Great Alone. But Four Winds, wow. Yeah, I cried. I cried when I read this. It's about this family in Texas and how the drought has broken out in the Great Plains. This family of farmers is just like fighting to keep their family alive and like survive. I don't want to say too much more than that because the book starts and you're like, oh, this is about one thing, and then it like totally takes off. The character Loretta, yeah. I put in my Goodreads review, Loretta for President. I gave this 5 stars. I don't know if I said that already. This makes me so excited to read the other Kristen Hannah books because I feel like more people talk about her other books, like The Women and The Nightingale. I also ordered The Women as my book of the month pick this month. Yeah, I'm just really excited to get into it. What I like about this is it's historical fiction, which I'm not super into. I just feel like a lot of historical fiction is like really dense, kind of boring in some places, but she writes these characters. It's more about the characters and the context of that historical time period, which is really what historical fiction should feel like. I don't know, the way she writes, it's just more like digestible for someone that's not wanting to sit down and read a dense historical account. And I definitely learned about that time and that place through reading this book, which is awesome. It makes me excited to read, again, the rest of her books, but also more historical fiction. Next, I read A Curse for True Love. I don't have the hard copy of this book because it is only out in hardcover, and if I get it for my bookshelf, I want the soft cover so it matches my other 2 books. So I'm gonna wait and see if by April I still want to buy it. So I read this one on my Kindle. Again, like, I don't want to talk about this book specifically too much because it is the 3rd book of a trilogy and I don't want to give anything away. Still really fast paced. I enjoyed the book. There were a lot of unanswered questions at the end of this trilogy, and I just in general wasn't a fan of like how the 2nd book set up this book and like the given circumstances of the beginning of this book. There's a lot I still loved about this book. I did only give it 3 stars though, just because the end I was like, I cannot believe this is the end and like this is how we've ended things. Like, I have so many questions. It would be nice if she could just like write a little like novella to like wrap things up or something. Again, not a bad read. I enjoyed reading it. I just 3 stars because there are so many things that I want to know that I just don't know. Book number 13. I read Binding 13. I've been wanting to read this series for a while now as well. This was written in 2018. This is a long book. It reminded me of the Magnolia Parks books because it does go back and forth between these 2 young people who, you know, kind of find each other. It's a very, very slow burn. They're Irish. It takes place in Cork, which is exciting to me because my ancestors are from Cork, and that's like one of like the top places I want to visit. But yeah, it did remind me of Magnolia Parks because it's long, it's character driven, and it goes back and forth between the 2 characters' perspectives. It has some family dynamics. The humor's like slightly different, but it kind of reminded me of it a little bit. I don't know. I give this 4 stars. Like, I really enjoyed it. It was a slow burn. I wasn't necessarily like mad about it. I wasn't like, God, when is this gonna pick up? But it was a little slow, and by the end I was like, okay, like I'm ready for this to wrap up a little bit. It's basically about this girl who was like severely bullied and went to this public school, and then her parents finally gave in and are like paying for her to go to this private school now where like no one is bothering her. But she is around other people that are a little more wealthy than she is. This kid, Johnny, is like a star rugby player, and he's plagued by this injury, and he goes to the private school. The first day of school for Shannon, who has a like also very challenging home life and family life. The first day of school for her, he accidentally kicks a ball at her or something and like injures her head. But it's an accident. This girl Shannon is so used to being bullied in her old school on purpose, and then this happens on the first day, but it was an accident. That's kind of how they meet. I do want to continue with the series. They are free on Audible. I don't know if you need a subscription to Audible. I do have one. I'm gonna read these as I see fit. It's a long book. I think it's like 800, yeah, it says it's 887 pages. Next, I couldn't help myself. I listened to Stassi Schroeder's new book from Vanderpump Rules. She has 2 other books. I haven't read them, but this one was supposed to be a little more like in touch with reality, they say. Just a little bit more grounded. It was a really nice like palate cleansing read. I also listened to it on Spotify. It's narrated by her. Kind of just felt like I was listening to a podcast, but it's called You Can't Have It All, and it's basically like about these pressures. I think she lives in LA, and I do think a lot of the pressures that she feels are heightened there. You know, we look on social media and we see like the woman that has it all. It's kind of Stassi like deconstructing that and being like, do we want to have it all? Because it seems like a lot of work. Let's talk about what that actually means, like the implications of that, etc. Didn't rate this because it's a memoir. I was like really pleasantly surprised. I almost turned it off when I first started listening because I was like, I can't. But I was like, no, just give it, like, just listen to the first chapter. And because I started judging it pretty early on, and I was like, just give it a second. And I was happy I finished the end. It's like a 5-hour audiobook, so if you listen to it at 3 times speed like I do, it'll go by really fast. And the last book I read this month was hella beautiful. Finally, my mom has been wanting me to read this for so long, by Anne Napolitano. It's a story about this like Italian-American family. There's 4 sisters, and they mention Little Women in the book, and that's kind of what it felt like to me a bit. And then it's also about this young man, William, who marries one of the girls who doesn't really have a family. It's about like kind of complex family relationships and people becoming estranged and like what that implies for their children. This book definitely hit home for me. That's all I'm gonna say. And I rated it 5 stars. It was a little hard to get into the story of these sisters and like their lives. It's great. Like, I would love for this to be a movie. What I love about this book and these characters is like, if you were to present the situation that happened to anyone, people would have so many judgments on all of the people involved. But because you get all of their perspectives, you just love them so much. You have so much empathy for them, and it's an amazing book. Like, I can't stress that enough. It is a little hard to get into. I would say the style of writing is a little more like mature. Like, it's not as like fast paced, but I am so happy I read this. I did a split of like reading it on my Kindle and listening to it. That worked really well for me. Anyway, that's it. Those are the 15 books I read in September. It was a great month. I'm so happy. I had so much fun. I am so excited for this month. I'm going to have a TBR video posted next week, so look out for that for October. If you've read any of these books, please tell me what you think. If you have any other October or fall reading recs, please leave them down below. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week.